Hello everyone, welcome to the 2016 Toyota Owners 400 at Richmond International Raceway race review, where I recap what went on before the race, during the race, and after the race, looking ahead to the following race. And what are my overall thoughts on this race? I enjoyed the race. Definitely the best Richmond race in a while. The last few Richmond races have been pretty unwatchable, and that's pretty pathetic for a short track, especially one that used to be called the action track. I don't know if we should start calling Richmond the action track after today's race, but I think we could. But I think we could down the road, because I think we saw some good racing, especially towards the end. I'll get to the closing laps of that race. But overall, I think one thing that I noticed compared to the previous races was that we saw 3 and even 4 wide racing at this track, and that's something that we haven't really seen in quite some time, or maybe ever at Richmond since they went to this 0.75 mile configuration in 1998, I believe. This is just based off of my memory. I think that Goodyear definitely did bring a good tire for the race. One that wore out pretty quickly, and it allowed for drivers to race wherever they want, high or low. And another thing I also liked about this race was how, compared to the other 2 short track races we've seen this season, Martinsville and Bristol, no one straight up dominated the race from start to finish. We had many different drivers take turns towards the front, dominating the race, and any of these drivers could have won the race. Carl Edwards of the most laps. Kyle Busch was strong, especially late in the race. Johnson and Harvick were good early on in the race, and Kurt Busch I think had his best performance in a while. He just didn't get the finish to really show for it. Overall, I enjoyed the race. There was a lot of talk in the NASCAR community between Bristol and today's race in Richmond, and the first one I want to point out was how this was the first scheduled Richmond Day race since the spring of 1997. It was announced last year in the fall that the spring Richmond race would return to a daytime, and that's how it used to be up until 1998. So I liked the fact that we returned to tradition. I like the fact that the spring race now has a better identity than the fall race compared to what it used to have. I also think that having a day race made the racing at Richmond better. So that's why I like this change. Also, with Ryan Ellis making his first start in 2016 in a BK racing car, this was the first time since the Daytona 500 that we had more than 40 entries, and so for once qualifying actually meant something. And the one driver that DNQ'd was Cole Witz, and that was because among the non-charter teams he was the slowest, because qualifying got rained out. But I think I think that it is good that after starting out with 39 cars, we are now back up to 40 cars, and now we have 41 cars. I know this won't be continuing for the rest of the season, but I think that it is good that car counts are back to where I think they should be, 40 or more. But the big news story that everyone was talking about was Tony Stewart returning to the 14 car. So back in, I think it was early February, he injured his back in a dune buggy incident. And so he had to miss the first 8 races of the season. But the only time he was not at the racetrack was speed weeks. But now Tony Stewart makes his return. He was also given a chase waiver, and then later that day, he was given a controversial fine, but I've already made a video about that, so you can go check out that video if you want to see my thoughts on that fine. So as far as Tony Stewart getting the chase waiver, NASCAR set a precedent last year by giving Kyle Busch a waiver for being injured, and at least they're being consistent when it comes to that. Now, will Tony Stewart make the chase? I'm certainly not as confident in him that he'll make the chase compared to Kyle Busch, because Tony Stewart has slowed down tremendously over the last few years, and he hasn't won a race in almost 3 years. And Tony Stewart can definitely win. I think that I think that he could win next week at Talladega, for example, or just simply later on in the season, if he starts showing more speed, he could just simply go to a racetrack, dominate, and win the race. I think it is possible, but for the time being, I don't see Tony Stewart likely making the chase. So that's my thoughts on that. Also, Patrick Carpentier is going to make a return to NASCAR for 2 races in the 32 car. The first one at Sonoma, and then the second one at Indianapolis for the Brickyard 400. And I'm interested to see how well he'll do at Sonoma, because he is considered to be a road course ringer. So who knows? He might be a surprise at Sonoma. But I think it is cool to see him back here. And I didn't expect this new story, because I thought back in 2011 or 2012 he made a statement that he was going to retire from racing, or maybe at least NASCAR. I don't exactly remember, but there was something. But I think he said something like that. So that's why him announcing a return to NASCAR is surprising to me. Anyway, so now let's get to the weekend. So on Friday, the first practice session was shortened due to rain, and the top 10 was Harvick, Logano, Johnson, Edwards, Hamlin, Keselowski, Kurt Busch, Kasey Kahne, Kyle Busch, and AJ Allmendinger. Then qualifying was rained out, so they lined up the field based on the practice order. So that means Kevin Harvick got the pole, and then we only had one more practice session on Saturday morning, and Jimmy Johnson was the fastest in that practice session. He was followed by Kahne, Kyle Busch, Kevin Harvick, Kyle Edwards, Matt Kenseth, Mark Truex Jr., AJ Allmendinger, Paul Menard, and Joey Logano. And now let's get on to the highlights that I picked up on in the race. One thing that certainly caught my eye was how in the first half of the race, if you compare the first half of the race to the second half of the race, it kind of felt like 2 different races in a way, because we started the first 157 laps, green flag, no caution whatsoever. I knew that at some point we were going to have a caution, and then our first caution came out at lap 158 for debris on the back stretch. But then after that, we didn't come close to having a green flag run that long at all. In fact, the second longest green flag run was 49 laps. So it was interesting that we started out the race going so long without a caution, and then we didn't come close then ever since. And actually, the first 3 cautions were actually all for debris. And I think on the first 2 of them, or maybe there were 4 debris cautions in total. But it was either the third one or the fourth one where Fox only showed debris. And Fox, I think, needs to do a better job at doing that, because it leads to these conspiracy theorists on people who believe in NASCAR throws these fake debris cautions. So I think this needs to be get better by Fox. But then in the second half of the race, for a moment, it became a case of cautions breed cautions. For example, after our 4th debris caution on 314, we had 2 quick cautions after that, and they were both on restarts. Kyle Larson made contact with Ryan Newman on restart, and then Ryan Newman cut down a left rear tire spot on turn 4. That brought out a caution, and then the next caution we didn't even get to turn number one. And what happened was Michael Nets, I think, spun the tires or was slow, and was slow. Brian Ellis slowed down. Landon Castle didn't get the message, and so he went first down on the front stretch. So for a moment, it became a cautions, but then we spent the last 36 laps green flag racing. But I remember as I was watching, just before the first caution, I was like, man, this race is likely going to be quick. But then we had a whole bunch of cautions, and my somewhat prediction came false. But I was actually hoping we would actually have we would actually have fewer cautions at the moment we did have, because I kind of like green flag racing in pit stops at short tracks because it's like a rarity, but it's a rarity, but it's also kind of like a special treat. Just because it doesn't happen every single time we go to short tracks, and it certainly did not happen at all when we were at Martinsville in Bristol. So, but overall, I still enjoyed. Overall, like I said in the beginning, I still enjoyed the race. Vibrations, loose wheels, and lug nuts have been talked a lot about in the previous two races. But really, we didn't really see. We saw very little of that in today's race in Richmond. So maybe teams are being more careful and putting all 5 lug nuts on more often, or maybe it's just or maybe it's just a strange coincidence. I don't really know. The only unscheduled pickups I saw for vibrations were from Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Austin Dillon, and this happened in the second half of the race, I believe. But I don't recall any other drivers making unscheduled pit stops for loose wheels. And NASCAR did say back on Friday that they're gonna be looking into this, and we could possibly be seeing a change for the next race. But it'll be interesting to see what happens forward, and where this will all go, because like I said, it hasn't been talked about a lot in the past 2 weeks. At Martinsville and Richmond earlier this year, we saw many underdogs / newer faces towards the front and got finishes, but we honestly didn't really see that today at Richmond. The drivers who are front were the drivers that you expected. The only driver that you could say was a surprise was Casey Kane. He got his first top 5 finish of the season, and actually had a top 5 car pretty much the entire race long. So it was definitely his best sprint cup performance in definitely quite some time. He didn't have a car that could win, but I think that this fourth place finish is definitely good for him, especially since his start has he's mostly struggled so far this season. Getting involved in incidents and just simply not running and finishing well. But I think that this could definitely be the start of Casey Kane turning things around. And honestly, I still think that a Casey Kane NFI team still need to find some speed in order to win races. But if he can continue to run well, run this well, I think that he can easily point his way into the chase. He's currently 14th in points, so he's currently in the chase right now. But he's going to need to be consistent, and that's something that he lacked of last year in the summer, and that's what prevented him from making the chase for the most part. Earlier in the race, Ricky Stenhouse Jr. was having a good run. In fact, I think that there were moments when Ricky Stenhouse Jr. actually had a top 5 car. I think at one point got as high as 6. But then he made an unscheduled pit stop, and that ruined him having a good finish. But but he was having a good day before that. And so once again, Roush Racing continues to uh, prove, prove that they have gotten a little better compared to last year, because Greg Biffle and Trevor Bayne also spent some time inside the top 15 10 as well. Um, as far as any other surprises or newer faces, Chase Elliott got off to a slow start, but then towards the end of the race, he almost got into the top 10. He finished 12th. As far as that, I don't really see any other surprises. Tony Stewart got a lot of coverage throughout the whole race, and obviously for good reasons. You know, it was his first star in 2016. He's one of the most well-known and respected drivers in NASCAR, and had a solid performance. He finished, I think, in the 19th position. Yes, he did on the lead lap. So I think that for him it was a solid day, but it wasn't easy at all. Tony Stewart fell off the lead lap around midway through the race, and actually on the lap 258 restart, Logano decided to go in between Tony Stewart and our car, and in the 1422 made contact and actually cut down the left rear tire, but Tony Stewart was but Tony Stewart was still able to not fall off of being one lap down, and then later in the race, he got the free pass and was able to get back inside the top 20. So it certainly was not easy. So it certainly was not easy for Tony Stewart. Things could have ended up much worse. But overall, listening and reading to what he had to say on the radio, he definitely sounded like he was having fun. He was enjoying himself. He was even, I think, funny at one point when he saw when on one restart he saw Chase Elliott make a crazy forward move after a restart. So Tony Stewart was definitely enjoying himself, and that was something that we saw very little or not at all last year. So I think that already one race into the season, Tony Stewart is enjoying himself, and I think that positive attitude, I think, is actually going to help him down the road in his final season. So now let's look into the final laps of the race, and let's talk. But first, I want to talk about what went on before that. So on the final restart, with about 35 laps to go, Kyle Busch restarted first, Carl Edwards restarted second, and Kyle Busch pulled away. But with about 10-15 laps to go, Carl Edwards started reeling in Kyle Busch, because Carl Edwards' car was always better the longer the green flag run went. And so that's why he was reeling him in. And with about 10 laps to go, they were separated by about half a second, and both drivers were using two different groups. Carl Edwards was riding around the top. Kyle Busch was hugging the white line, and a couple times this did swap. For example, when Carl Edwards realized, when Kyle Busch realized that his teammate Carl Edwards was gaining on him on the high side, Kyle Busch moved up high. And then there were a couple times where Carl Edwards used the bottom in turns 1 2, and Kyle Busch was on the high side. So they swapped the lanes a couple times. But with about 3 to 4 laps to go, I thought Carl Edwards had used up his stuff too much, because at that point he was just hanging on for dear life, getting loose off the corners, and it looked like Kyle Busch was going to get his third win in 4 races. But here is what happened. So here we go. Coming to the white flag, they're separated by 2 car lanes. Entering turn 1 2, Carl Edwards gets into turns 1 2 really deep. By this point, they are side by side. But Kyle Busch gets a good run off turn 2, and so now they are nose to tail down the back stretch. Here we go. Carl Edwards, he's on the bumper for Kyle Busch. Here he goes. He gives him the bumper run. Kyle Busch saves it, and Carl Edwards goes right on by. Carl Edwards wins the Toyota Owners 400 at Richmond. I did not expect Carl Edwards to get that good of a run in turns 1-2 and be put the bumper to him. He's not exactly the type. He's not exactly the type of driver that I would expect to get him a move. But now, as I'm thinking about it, he's actually he's actually done moves like this before. For example, he back in Phoenix, he tried to move He tried to move Kevin Harvick out of the way and almost worked at Phoenix. And this is also not the first time that him and Kyle Busch have gotten together in a race. This happened in the 2008 Bristol Night Race. And let's show you this. He got into Kyle Busch, and he would go on to win the race. Kyle Busch wasn't very happy afterwards. So it actually is not the first time we've seen something like this. But anyway, back to this. Carl Edwards takes the win, back-to-back wins, his 27th victory. Second at Richmond, he won here back in the fall of 2013, and he is just simply on a roll. Fast cars, leading a ton of laps, and winning races. And now he is the points leader. So Carl Edwards is definitely looking like a championship contender. So now let's wrap things up and look ahead to Talladega. So like I said in the beginning, I enjoyed the Richmond race, and especially when we look at the finish, we continue to see good racing and exciting moments in 2016. And I think it's safe to say that this year is already better than what the whole 2015 season had to provide. So I think a lot of this is due thanks to NASCAR's new rules package, less downforce off the tires, and it's kind of a little surreal to think that a quarter of the season is already over, and we're already 2 months into the season. So time sure does fly by. And when you look at who's definitely strong after 9 races, you can just simply say that Joe Gibbs Racing is strong overall. I think they have won 5 out of the 9 races so far this season. 3 other 4 drivers have gone to victory lane. The other driver that has gone to victory lane, Matt Kenseth, has had fast cars most of the weeks. Just hasn't been able to execute it into a win. So really, all 4 drivers in Joe Gibbs Racing are strong. And I think we're going to be seeing more of this down the road. And now let's look ahead to Talladega, the 2.66 mile super speedway. I think one thing that may be talked about, but maybe won't, is that this is going to be our first return to Talladega since last October's debacle, which is really kind of a moment in NASCAR that I wish I could forget, but I just can't. Unfortunately, it was really a huge black eye to NASCAR, and hopefully we don't see anything like that again. I hope that we could have a good race at Talladega for once. Because it is restrictor plate racing, anyone could win, really. I mean, chances are, I think we'll likely see a familiar name driving for a big team win, but you never know. We've seen it. We've seen some huge underdog victories at Talladega before, so don't count that out. As far as who's going to win, well, if Dale Earnhardt Jr. brings Amelia to Talladega, I think he'll be strong. But we also have to remember that in the Daytona 500, which is Talladega's sister track, Joe Gibbs Racing was down at all 4 cars, including their semi car team. Martin Truex Jr. was also good there, and they controlled the flow of the race because all 4/5 cars were up front, almost the whole race, uh, um, and it made it hard for a second group to pass them. Now Talladega, which is wider, um, I think we will see a lot more 3 and 4 wide racing, uh, but we don't. But I don't really know for sure. And Talladega has so much unknown in it anyway, from when the big one will happen, who's going to lead the race, etc. So overall, I hope that we can have a good race at Talladega with no controversy or rather BS. So that is pretty much all I have to say in this race review. So I hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe, and bye.